Hi there, this is John, and welcome to another edition of Old Guy Career Change. To recap, I've got three career paths in front of me. One is the standard full-time job. I've given up on that. If lightning strikes, that's great, but I'm not counting on it. Second is a consulting company doing short-term gigs, and that's going pretty well. And the third path that I want to start talking about now is doing something totally different from software engineering, something that I've never considered before, something that's sort of way out in left field, but which I feel might be more fulfilling than the software engineering work I've been doing these many years. I described the results of one self-assessment that I did from What Color Is Your Parachute in the last video, and I want to give a quick update on this. I started reading this book, Do What You Are. It takes the Myers-Briggs personality types and applies them to career assessment, self-assessments, thinking about career change. I'm about 25% of the way through it. So far, the personality types, and by the way, I'm an ISFJ for all you Myers-Briggs fans out there, are grouped into personality temperaments, each with their own attitudes and functions, and there's a breakdown of how to take your four-letter Myers-Briggs code and kind of, massage it into further insight. Now, the good news is that its results so far are reinforcing the results that I've gotten from my other self-assessments, and it's giving me additional insights and additional ways of looking at things. Back to one of the paths away from software engineering. In this video, I'll talk about becoming a vet tech and my decision on whether to pursue it. In the US, a vet tech is to a vet what a nurse is to a doctor. They assist during surgeries, they perform minor and mid-level medical procedures, they monitor patients' conditions, etc. So how'd I come to look at becoming a vet tech? About 2 months after I was laid off, I was talking with a good friend of mine about my full-time job search, which wasn't going so well, and looking for different ideas. And he happened to say, almost as a side comment, that his wife had considered this other new career of being a vet tech. And I said, what's a vet tech? And we got to talking about it. And I had never heard of this occupation before, but as soon as I learned about it, it stuck with me. It captured my imagination and it sounded really cool. The What Color Is Your Parachute assessments called it out as a possibility, and I've also taken online assessments like one at careerexplorer.com. And these things, you answer questions about what you like and don't like and how you would react to certain scenarios, and then what comes out is a purported advice in general terms about what kind of careers you should consider. Multiples of them pointed me at animal care, of which vet tech is one. And since all of that, I've watched countless YouTube videos about the vet tech occupation. There are all sorts of videos, a day in the life of a vet tech, and vet tech schooling, and what's it like. And I've also talked to an admissions advisor at a local school about their vet tech program, what's involved. I toured their classrooms. And I've actually also discussed this with a friend who is a vet, and we've known for many years, and I trust her opinion a great deal. The good news is the work is super interesting and I would have a blast. It would be super fulfilling. It would give me a real sense of accomplishment and satisfaction at the end of each day. Saving lives, alleviating pain and suffering, helping animals stay healthy, helping them live their best lives. I mean, what could be a better job than that, right? And it checks quite a few boxes from my self-assessment. My self-assessments identified strong transferable skills and occupations and topics that I have enthusiasm for and that I would enjoy working in. And many of them are reflected in the occupation of being a vet tech. And now for the bad news. The bad news is I've identified two primary risks. Risk number one is the timing of this in relationship to my age. Now, every state is different. In Washington State, vet tech education is nominally a 2-year-long program. It's an associate's degree. Without financial aid, it's about $30,000, give or take. When you graduate, you're an unlicensed vet tech. Then you take a national certification test called the VTNE. After you pass the VTNE, you then take a Washington State test. If you pass that test, then you're a licensed vet tech in Washington State. The most likely school I'd attend has rolling monthly admissions. If I started August 1, I'd exit the program in August of 2026. Then I take the exams, which have their own periodic testing dates 2 or 3 times a year. And so in round numbers, I'd be a licensed vet tech in Washington State sometime around January 2027. Let's say Q1 of 2027, which is when I'd be 69 years old. So, in every occupation, a new graduate gets additional education from their employer. In the software world, a new hire would get help in learning their way around the company's code bases and tools and procedures, the norms for communications and all that. If the employee happens to do something that's not the norm or they mess up, they're given feedback and the opportunity to fix things. They have to pull out a code change, put in a workaround, whatever. There's the same thing in the veterinarian world for vet techs, but it's more intense and longer without the same leeway. Why? Because lives are at stake. And even though you're mostly in the back room, you come into contact with clients who may be hard to get along with in the best of times, who now perhaps are in the worst of times, making very difficult decisions under emotional pain. And so it's a combination of technical accuracy when you do the medical operations, plus having to interact with clients who are stressed and under a lot of pain and making tough choices. Some people are at their best in those situations and some are not. So all the data I have is that a newly minted vet tech is closely managed for years. Not for a few months, not for a quarter or two, but for a couple to a few years, depending upon who I talk to. With the expectation that after that period of intense management and oversight, they'd stick around for a few years longer. And so I have to reluctantly conclude that a veterinarian practice may not want to invest that training time in a 69-year-old graduate. Now, on the other side of the ledger, employment data that I have read say that vet techs are in very high demand now, particularly in this part of the country, and will be for years because their supply and demand is out of whack. But employment supply and demand eventually fixes itself, right? So at least in a free market. So this won't be a permanent state of affairs. Now, I could partially compensate for this maybe by having a perfect GPA from a great school. But a perfect GPA from the most likely school I'd attend wouldn't do that because the most likely school has a middling reputation. More on that in a minute. The bottom line is I would encounter the same kind of ageism, I think, I'm encountering today in software engineering. It's also true, of course, that I would have some advantages that younger graduates wouldn't have. I would have maturity, stability, reliability, world knowledge, and considerable computer smarts that would be helpful in any office. Would those entirely compensate? Not likely. Would those partially compensate? I bet. How much? I don't know. And this risk is a challenging thing to evaluate. If I didn't pursue a vet tech career because of some internal reasons, because I decided that something wasn't right for me, that some aspect of it wasn't good, that would be one thing, right? But this is a situation where if I don't do this, it will be because of an external reason. It'll be because of other people's choices. Risk number 2 is the quality of the nearby education. And this is separate but related to what I just talked about. The closest vet tech program is from PIMA Medical Institute, aka PIMA, PIMA. They have campuses across the country. One of their campuses is 45 minutes away by mass transit, which is an acceptable commute. All of the classes are on campus. At PIMA Medical Institute, I first do a 9-month program to become a vet assistant, which is a less medically invasive kind of role coupled with administrative kind of tasks. Then I take a 1 1/4 year program after vet assistant to become a vet tech. So that's about 2 years total, and after that I would have an associate's degree. I met with a PIMA admissions counselor, toured some classrooms, I took a vet assistant admissions test, I passed, all looks good. According to the admissions counselor, the workload is about 20 hours a week. So I could work somewhere as a vet assistant while I'm in the vet tech part of the sequence. And while I'm in the vet assistant part, the first part, I could continue working as a software contractor and, 10, 20 hours a week. And then I have the workload of 20 hours a week for the school. And so that all works out. PIMA's programs are fully accredited. They've been around for about 50 years, I think, and they've had a lot of graduates. All the data I have says that, at least in the Pacific Northwest, they're considered okay by local veterinarians. No one will look at PIMA on a resume and go, "Holy crap, you went to PIMA, you're a brainiac." No one's going to say that. The reaction instead will be more like, "That's nice, let's see if you're any good." The best way I could maybe give an analogy, a software engineering world, if you see a college graduate resume come in and they went to Stanford or MIT, you would immediately give that resume a close look. If they had a high GPA from Stanford, you'd go, they clearly have something on the ball. If they want to do the kind of work, if they've done the kind of projects that you're doing in the job that you're interviewing for, you would say, let's bring this person in. They went to Stanford. They're a Stanford graduate, right? PIMA is not the Stanford of vet tech education. Many schools will be in the large middle area of education for any discipline, and that's where PIMA is, and that's fine. Much better schools would be so far away that it would be a major logistical and maybe also financial strain. Like I'd have to rent an apartment and maybe come home only on the weekends, and I'd be doing that for 2 years. And my wife would be unhappy. So let me sum up. I've reluctantly concluded that I won't pursue a vet tech career. The downside risk, plus the time invested, plus the cost of the education invested, total out to this not being a reasonable calculated risk. If I were 53, I'd go for it, but not at 66. I want to say that someone else in the same situation might conclude differently. Someone might say, to heck with this, I'm going to go do it and go for it, and if anyone gets in my way, I'll just run right over them. And that's totally great and fine. Everyone's different. Everyone calculates risks and reward and the probability of things happening differently. That's totally cool. The risks and rewards do not pencil out for me, but they may pencil out for someone else. They may pencil out for you. I enjoyed delving into this as a potential new occupation. It was very interesting. It was fulfilling in a way to actually dig into it and to conceive of the possibility of doing something radically different. I allowed myself that freedom, and honestly, I've never really done that for about 50 years. So this is healthy. So what now? Well, I'm evaluating another possible new occupation for myself that would be radically different, and I'll talk about that in my next installment. And now I'm supposed to say, please like this and hit the subscribe button and ask me any questions in the comments. Thank you for watching. See you next time.